From 2020 to 2023, Ecuador had almost doubled its homicide rate year after year, from 1,400 people murdered in 2020 to 8,200 in 2023. Just a decade ago, Ecuador was one of the safest countries in Latin America, but today, it's at the center of a brutal cocaine trafficking network, despite not producing the drug at all. So how did an entire country fall into violence? And how did a country that doesn't even produce cocaine start moving 70% of the world's cocaine through its ports? Well, to understand Ecuador's collapse, we need to look at Colombia, its neighbor. For decades, the FARC, or Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, controlled large parts of the cocaine trade. But in 2017, after fighting for over 50 years, they signed a peace deal. On paper, it was the end of a long war with plans to incorporate past gang members into society and provide them a political platform, as originally the cartel was founded as a Marxist movement for the poor. After the peace deal, violence dropped and homicide rates were the most stable it's been in years, but the plan was incomplete. Thousands of fighters were never properly reintegrated into society, lacking jobs, stability, or future of any kind. So when the peace deal was made, the group fractured over time. Smaller groups emerged, more desperate, more violent, and more focused on profit than ideology. At the same time, the Colombian government failed to deliver on key promises, particularly economic support. The result was predictable. The old order disappeared, and something worse took its place. Over time, Ecuador became the perfect doorway. It sits between Colombia and Peru, the two largest cocaine producers in the world, and has direct access to major shipping routes across the Pacific. And for traffickers, transport is everything. They spend millions building submarines for one-way drug runs, bribing officials, and killing anyone to infiltrate supply chains. But Ecuador offered a path more easy and more simple than any other route used. Bananas. Ecuador exports enormous quantities of bananas to Europe and North America. Thousands of containers leave the ports every week. And inside those containers, cocaine could be hidden, blended into legitimate trade. See, inspections were limited. As it turns out, the peace Ecuador endured was a crutch. The president at the time, President Moreno, weakened national security by eliminating government agencies and slashing spending on policing and prisons. After all, why spend money on security when your country has been the safest it's ever been? But as a result, borders were porous and oversight was weak. On top of that, there was no international help with the increase in narco-trafficking, as in 2009, Ecuador expelled US military forces that had assisted in anti-drug operations. So by 2021, nearly a third of all cocaine seized in Western and Central Europe was traced back to Ecuador. 2022 showed a record 47.5 metric tons of cocaine. To put that into perspective, this is a ton of cocaine. So multiply that by 47 and add a half. That is a lot. Even the Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa's family business, Noboa Trading, was implicated in cocaine trafficking, with a large shipment from Noboa Trading being seized in Europe. While the pressure built for several years after the peace deal with FARC, it exploded in 2020. Ecuador's homicide rate surged from around 8 per 100,000 people to 46 in just a few years. Gangs like Los Choneros and Los Lobos aligned themselves with powerful Mexican and Albanian cartels. Prisons became war zones because of their slashed funding and ramped up incarceration rates. In fact, 27 prisoners were found hanged in El Oro prison from battles between local cartels. And outside prison walls, violence was just as bad. The worst culminated presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio being assassinated after speaking out against organized crime and corruption. Now, we're not here to say that there's no solutions. There are solutions, but none are easy. Ports and borders need real, reliable security. Investments need to be made into anti-corruption campaigns. And internationally, Ecuador needs to work together with states like Colombia and the United States, because the crisis doesn't stop at Ecuador's borders. It is a transnational issue. But most importantly, people need alternatives, because as long as poverty and instability remain, the cartels will always have recruits. In the end, Ecuador's collapse into cartel violence wasn't inevitable. It was the product of a failed demobilization in Colombia, a power vacuum left unfilled, weak institutions vulnerable to corruption, and a global demand for cocaine that never really slowed down. A peace deal means to end decades of conflict, unintentionally scattered violence across borders. And Ecuador, once one of the safer countries in Latin America, became the crossroads of a brutal drug war.